Okay, this is problem number 2 on the study guide, extremely similar to the one on the final. The variation between these is very little, and in fact, this is one of the topics we covered pretty well before the break. Um, you're given some clues about, one of the trig functions, what its value is, even told what quarter it is in, so you don't have to like hunt around or try to like infer based on whether this is positive or negative and some other parameter. And typically, if you ignore this, and if I just went on to say, okay, find the sine, cosine, secant, cosecant, and cotangent, it would look just like all those problems we did in class. Instead, what they've done is say, well, let's find the sine times the secant plus the cosine squared, which forces you to find the sine, find the secant, and find the cosine. You just don't have to find the cotangent and the cosecant. But you do have to then take those three things, multiply these two together, and add this squared. And we'll do that over here. And again, as you go along, just show everything you're doing. And, there's like points for every little thing. So keep that in mind. And let's get started. So first of all, we know we're in quadrant 3. So I'm just going to draw some kind of line there. I'm trying to make it a little bigger. I'm pretty sure that's not the right angle at all, but it's, doesn't have to be. I'm not worried about being to scale here. I'm just going to draw things in. So this is my angle theta. Okay, it's a reference angle from the x-axis. We're going to look at if this angle's tangent is the square root of 7 over 3. That means that this line has to be the square root of 7, which is negative, and this line has to be negative 3, so that negative square root of 7 divided by negative 3 is positive square root of 7 over 3. And that makes this work in quadrant 3. Okay, so easy peasy there. We're going to use the Pythagorean theorem. We're going to take the square root of 7 squared plus, actually the negative square root of 7, but you know what's going to happen here. Negative 3 squared equals our hypotenuse squared, and square root of 7 squared is, of course, even if squaring a negative is going to be positive, so we're going to get 7 here, we can get 9 here, which is 16. We'll just say 16, and we know that's h squared, so h must be 4. So we can just put a 4 right there. Okay, so just quick Pythagorean theorem, and all of a sudden we've got our hypotenuse, and we can move on and talk about other things. Okay, so now I need to find 3 things. I need to find the sine, I need to find the secant, and I need to find the cosine. So here's what I'm going to do. Secant is just the inverse of the cosine. So I'm going to write down, I'm going to find the sine. Okay, then I'm going to find the cosine. Then I'm just going to invert it for the secant. And in this case, since we're doing all this other math, I'm not even going to worry about simplifying these things and rationalizing denominators. I'm just going to write them down. Okay? So, here we go. The sine is going to be the opposite over the hypotenuse. So, negative square root of 7 over 4. The cosine, remember we're going to square this, but the cosine is going to be negative 3 over 4. And we're just going to square that. And if the cosine is negative 3 over 4, then the secant is negative 4 over 3. Okay? So easy peasy. This kind of comes out nice. These 4's actually cancel out. Make that a negative 1. So we actually get square root of 7, positive, because negative times a negative. And we end up with square root of 7 over 3 over here. And over here we're going to get 9 over 16. Okay? The way this one came out, and again, this is one I kind of made up, so hopefully when you're doing one on the final, you'll get something that has easier denominators to kind of put together. So don't get hung up on that. Keep in mind, there's points for this, there's points for each of these, there's points for all this setup, and if the mistake is made down here, that's going to be considered, in my opinion, and I'm the one grading it, at least as far as I know, it should be pretty easy. So as far as I know, the only common denominator between 3 and 16 is like 48. So let's go ahead and do that. 16 goes into 48 3 times because we multiplied it by 3, so this is going to be 27. And so then 16 square root of 7. And now we can combine these as 16 square roots of 7 plus 27 over 48. That may or may not, doesn't look like we can simplify that in any way. So that's just your answer. There's nothing to it. So like I said, if this is the thing that messes you up or you don't get hung up about that. What this is really testing, remember what it should have just asked is what are the other trig functions? But instead it said, well, find at least enough of the trig functions that you could do this calculation. So that's all there is to this type of problem. It's basically like the ones we did in class. So good luck. This shouldn't be one that troubles you too much on the final.